Hello, everybody. It's George from Ireland. How are you? Welcome back to the channel once again. So, yeah, rumors been coming out for the past few days that the Kremlin is seeking peace negotiations in Ukraine, possibly just for a ceasefire rather than permanent peace, but not ruled out ending the conflict totally. There was a piece in the New York Times a few days ago saying that US government officials who wished to remain anonymous had said they'd spoken to Russian government officials who said, we really would like to parley about this. And the American government officials said that they'd never seen anything like this during the war, that the Russian diplomats and so forth were not even willing to entertain peace talks, especially involving the United States. They spoke directly to the Ukrainians face to face in Belarus, in Turkey, in the first couple of months of the war. But since the summer of 2022, there's been nothing like that. And why? Is this serious? Are they just playing footsie? Why these diplomatic maneuvers? And there are a number of possible reasons, and not necessarily contradictory reasons, why this is happening. Maybe that Russia really does want to end the war, like now, but that I think is unlikely because they're so far from achieving their goals. Remember, Putin, when he declared the so-called special military operation, he said the objectives were twofold: the denazification of Ukraine, i.e., it has to be Nazified by under his control, and the demilitarization of Ukraine. Now, Putin's, failed spectacularly, certainly on the latter, because Ukraine is better armed than ever before. NATO's actually expanded, taken another member, Finland, about to take in Sweden. Now, the Turks have dropped their objections. And as for overthrowing the Zelensky government, well, that hasn't happened. He's fairly popular. If the election goes ahead on schedule next year, as Zelensky said it shan't, but Zelensky would probably be re-elected. And even if he's not, it'd be someone else who's equally pro-Western who would win in his place. Nevertheless, war weariness has set in Ukraine. They suffered tens of thousands of deaths, roughly 50,000 military deaths, about triple the number of wounded, at least 10,000 civilians killed, at least, and obviously millions who fled abroad. So significant damage that the Ukrainians might be willing to cut a deal and to give Russia something, some land, either de facto or de jure, agreed to limit their armed forces, agreed never to join NATO. I mean, NATO is not going to let Ukraine in ever, as I see it. Even Sweden had was having enough difficulty getting in, so that the Ukrainians might go for it. But so far, for next year, there doesn't appear to be a dovish candidate who's emerged in Ukraine. Now, not that Russia would honor it. The Putin regime is utterly dishonorable and will always stab you in the back, will renege on its promises, beef up their armed forces because they've lost many years of military production, wait for what they think is a propitious moment, and strike again. And that's what we've been doing for almost 10 years. Remember, this conflict's been going since the spring of 2014, but they're just fighting on a larger scale. It could be because Putin's got an eye on this forthcoming election in Russia to be held on the 17th day of March. Now, an auspicious day, of course, it's Ireland's national day, but he's not holding it because it's Paddy's Day any more than it's the day of the reunification of Italy. Anyhow, because that will appease a section of the Russian public which is sick and tired of this conflict, but not actually ending the war, which would disappoint the hawks. So it could be both of those reasons. Another way to divide your enemies. Some Ukrainians and some of the Western allies, some will say, okay, well, let's go for that. Let's buy it. And, well, all the more excuse to reduce armaments shipments, saying, oh, well, that's just fueling the flames and that's queering the pitch for these peace negotiations, as opposed to the hardliners say, no, Ukraine is Ukraine. We must defend its sovereignty, its democracy, because this is the domino theory. If Ukraine falls, who'll be the next victim? It'll be Moldova, it'll be Georgia, then they'll try the Baltics or Finland or Poland or anywhere where the Russians are once held sway. So those reasons as well. And because remember, the so-called peaceniks in the US Congress were both on the left of the Democrats and the right of the Republican Party, not the center of either parties. They're willing to go for this. And likewise, some people on the far left in European Union countries like the Republic of Ireland or some like neo-Nazis in various EU countries are amenable to this, despite the way Putin focuses on so-called anti-Nazism as part of his selling point. So the other thing is the Ukrainians have delivered mighty strokes of war and have made Russia pay dearly. Now, the Ukrainians have paid a heavy price themselves themselves. But Russia's finding it difficult to sustain operations. Ukrainians are going to find it even more difficult because their ammunition stocks are dangerously low and they're just not being replenished. And when on earth is that aid package going to get through the US Congress? I think it will get through, but probably not for a couple of months. And they won't get the whole shebang. They won't get $50 billion. It'll be less than that, 40 billion, 30 billion, something like that. And the European Union and the United States, they're just not audacious enough to say, yeah, we're confiscating $300 billion of Russian government assets in Western countries, and we're going to use it all for Ukraine. Remember, in almost 2 years of war, Ukraine has received about $100 billion of military aid. Yeah, so that $300 billion would be about 6 years worth of military aid. And Western countries often spend it on manufacturing shells in their country to give to Ukraine and actually stimulate their economies so much. And Russia just can't afford to ramp up so fast. Because Russia's just finding it quite difficult and would not really end the war. This would be more like a half time, as I say, until they think the time has come and they'll strike while the iron is hot. If Trump comes back in or something like that. But, for Trump to be inaugurated, assuming he wins next November, will be 20th of January. That's over a year away. But anyway, between then and now, actually, a major Russian breakthrough cannot be ruled out because Russia might be able to do that because Ukrainian morale could collapse when they just don't have the munitions. But the Black Sea Fleet, that's been a fascinating development just a few days ago. So the 27th of November was just yesterday. The Ukrainian government said that the Russian landing ship named Novocherkassk was sunk by Ukrainian jets in the Russian port of Feodosiets on the Black Sea. So that would be a heavy blow. Now, the Russians acknowledge that it has been struck, but they haven't said it's been sunk. So when something's been destroyed, the Russians will usually admit it's been hit. When something's been damaged, the Russians won't say anything, usually. So, I mean, I view that as sort of confirmatory that this has happened. Hello there, Forza Brazil. Okay, what would I say? Buon Natal to you there. So these unofficial Russian media sources, Telegram channels, claim there were 77 sailors on board at the time of the attack, which is in the dead of night. They might have timed it specifically so that more sailors would be on board, and then more of them would get killed. Therefore, you want to not just sink the ship, but actually kill the sailors. Sorry, I know they want to be inhumane, because if they survive, they can serve on another ship. So anyway, the unofficial Russian media says that dozens of sailors are missing, presumably dead, and it's claimed that a United Kingdom manufactured Storm Shadow missile sank the vessel. I don't know if that's true. They're said to be superb missiles, cost about $2 million per pop. France makes them as well. But the United States won't follow suit and provide cruise missiles like Tomahawks in particular, which would be a real game changer, considering the US got thousands of Tomahawks. To give even 10%, even 1% would do something, would take out whatever big headquarters, a ammunition factory, and okay, Russia's not going to be struck in its own territory. The United States is not willing to authorize the use of its munitions to strike across the border into Russia. But actually, this was a British supplied missile which struck Russia proper, not the illegally occupied area of Ukraine that Russia's holding. And what's Russia done? Nothing. They fulminated about it. They're not hitting back. So it should be a signal to the USA that you could do this. And you would not pay a price. It would not be a third world war. The supposed red line has been crossed many times without repercussions. Anyway, so there are contradictory claims. Some on the Russian social media says that ship is still afloat. The United Kingdom concurred with Ukraine a few days ago, claiming that 20% of the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been sent to the bottom since the beginning of the war. So I don't know if that's true or false, but even if that were true, that means 80% of that Black Sea Fleet is still operational. So why not use it then? I mean, Russia, as I've often said, was rash in beginning this war, but actually overcautious once they did. If they threw all their assets at the Ukrainians, they would have won a long time ago. But they're husbanding them. They're being too circumspect. You got this fleet to fight if there is a war, and there is a war, so why not actually use it? And yes, there will be casualties, but your gain, absolute victory, taking the whole of the Ukrainian coast, being able to land more troops along the coast, and that's it. Cutting off Ukraine's exports via the Black Sea totally. that might be worth it for the sake of a few more ships being lost. Um, and even if 20% of them, only 20% destroyed, there are more which have been damaged, and so on, and sometimes beyond repair, or just takes months to repair. So the Russians have been very circumspect, and they're trying to keep their vessels out of range of the Ukrainians. Obviously, not enough because of that Feodosia strike. So Ukraine is able to export grain through the western half of the Black Sea relatively easily. Having said that, a Panamanian flagged vessel struck a mine, killed two sailors. It didn't actually sink the other day, but the grain exports from Ukraine, often by ships from neutral countries, they as soon as they can get into Romanian territorial waters and then Bulgarian territorial waters, assuming they won't be sunk. Finally, Turkish territorial waters, and so far that's actually worked for them. Would Russia even have the ability to do so if it wanted to? So Ukraine's done not bad considering they don't have a navy anymore. The United Kingdom announced a few days ago is donating two mine hunter vessels to Ukraine, but they haven't said when they're going to arrive. So these losses are painful for Russia, and they are capable of sustaining the war. So I don't think there's going to be negotiations. Certainly, much less a ceasefire, far less total peace in 2024, probably in 2025. But I could be wrong. Negotiations may lead nowhere. To brief ceasefire. What could Zelensky say if Russia's not going to withdraw from all the territory? He said, "I'll only talk to you once you withdraw from all our land, including Crimea." What if the deal was we'll have a ceasefire in return for releasing all these Ukrainian children who we've kidnapped? Now that would be hard to say no to. Anyway, thank you very much for watching my channel. Please make sure you donate on PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com, and subscribe on Patreon to see thousands more articles and videos. Goodbye.